Okay, so I think we are good to start now. Good evening, everyone. I welcome you to this webinar on positive psychology, contributions from the Bhagavad Gita, with our esteemed resource person, Professor Dharm P.S. Bhawuk. I am Dr. Shalini Duggal. My key areas of interest are positive and cultural psychology, and I'm also an executive committee member of the NPPA. I bring with myself about 18 years of work experience in the area of talent and leadership development. As you know, the NPPA, or the National Positive Psychology Association, has a vision to explore the field of positive psychology constructs globally with respect to teaching and research. Today's webinar is another step in that important direction. You can find the link to the NPPA website in the chat window to explore the website further. Before I introduce you to our honorable resource person, I would just like to share a few ground rules for the session. So you will be on mute during the session. We will be taking questions at the end of the session. So you could either post them in the chat window or raise your hand to ask the question at the end of the session. The topic that we will be discussing today is around the contribution of the Bhagavad Gita to positive psychology. The Bhagavad Gita presents various parts of living a harmonious life. Analysis of these paths lead to the discovery of many indigenous positive psychological constructs. Further, the Bhagavad Gita synthesizes both the positive, which is the Devic, and the negative, which is the Asuri, constructs in the 16th canto that allows for the development of an integrative framework for the study of positive psychology. Implications of these indigenous constructs for global psychology and research in the area of virtue, value, and positive psychology will be discussed today. I'm now honored to introduce to you our key resource person for today's webinar, Professor Dharm P.S. Bhawuk. Professor Bhawuk is Professor of Management and Culture and Community Psychology at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, USA. His research interests include indigenous psychology and management, with a focus on India and Nepal and cross-cultural training. Professor Bhavuk is a citizen of USA and was born and raised in Nepal. He has completed BTech honors in mechanical engineering from IIT Kharagpur in the year 1979, MBA from the University of Hawaii at Manoa in 1989, and PhD from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign in 1995. He is the author of the book Spirituality in Indian Psychology, Lessons from the Bhagavad Gita, published in 2011, and co-editor of the following books: Cambridge Handbook of Intercultural Training with Dan Landis in 2020, Barriers and Opportunities at the Base of the Pyramid in 2014, published by UNDP, Istanbul International Center for Private Sector in Development, and Asian Contributions to Cross-Cultural Psychology with Professor Janak Pandey and Professor Durganand Sinha in the year 1996. He has published more than 100 papers and book chapters and made over 250 presentations internationally. He is a founding fellow of International Academy of Intercultural Research, fellow of Indian Academy of Management, foreign fellow of National Academy of Psychology, and was H. Smith Richardson Junior Visiting Fellow, Center for Creative Leadership, North Carolina, between the years 2009 and 2010, and he is the recipient of many awards. He has regularly presented at the National Academy of Psychology in India and organized symposia on Indian psychology at NAOP and other universities. He has taught in China between the years 2015 to 2019, New Zealand in 2002, and Nepal in 2002 as visiting professor. I now invite Professor Bhawuk to please begin his session.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shilpaji. We'll start with 1 minute silence. So wherever you are, you can close your eyes. I will close my eyes also, so that we can all connect in this moment from across the ocean. And so I'll let you know when to open your eyes. So be comfortable, and we'll have a short dhyan. You can slowly open your eyes, and we are connected. So can we have the PowerPoint presentation, please? I like to start by giving you the gifts that you would receive in the session. So here are 3 take-home lessons. The first, the message of the Bhagavad Gita is all is well, just like in that popular Bollywood song. And I will share with you the verse during the presentation. And part of that all is well is that one is all and all is one. Positive and negative attributes are social constructions. So everything that we think about positive and negative is, as the wise Buddha would say, Nam and Roop. And as the Advaitins would say, we need to get beyond it by doing the practice of Neti Neti. So whatever we think is positive and negative is socially constructed. Negative attributes lead to bondage, hence are negative. Positive attributes lead to liberation, hence are positive. So now here we are defining negative and positive as positive is something that leads to liberation and negative is something that leads to bondage. That also is social construction. And what I mean by that is, even in India, we have Rinam Kritva Ghritam Pivet philosophy from Charvak. So for those who share that worldview, and by the way, that worldview will be criticized later as Asuri Sampad, they do not believe in this other worldview that if we do certain activities, it would lead to moksha or liberation, or as we say, living in the world without being attached in the world. So people like Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta Maharaj, they do not wait for liberation after leaving the body. They live in the world, as we say, Jivan Mukta. So that is our concept of liberation. It is not about after the end of the body, but in the body, living in the world, how do we become liberated? So remember, all is well. What that also means is, even if you do not do anything, all is well. It has different aspects. I'm not proposing that you do not do anything, but at a certain point in our life, we are doing certain things which we should not be doing. But in the long run, everything is a learning experience and everything makes sense if the person is reflective. So here we are all reflective people, so let's keep that in mind. So all is well, all will be well. The second lesson from the presentation that we should take is not only that there are so many positive constructs for research in the Bhagavad Gita, but also how to live and act. So the message of the Bhagavad Gita is that we should be cultivating the 26 positive attributes or the Daivik Sampada, and we should be uprooting the 6 Asuri Sampada, and then in about 12 verses, Sri Krishna explains or gives examples of how those 6 Asuri Sampads are reflected in our life. And I don't think I'll be able to spend a lot of time on it. So it would give you an exposure, and you would have to go and study and reflect on the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita yourself to get a deeper appreciation of both the Daivik Sampadas and how do we act when we are propelled by the Asuri Sampadas. And the third gift would be some tips about practice of Kshama, Abhay, and Ahimsa. So if you hold on to the thought, and if you forget, then you can always send me an email and we can talk about it. So one of the practice, since I said you will have the gift before I start, one of the practice of Kshama that I have used and that has worked for me, and in the Western psychology, we would call that positive, not reinforcement, but saying something positive all the time. And so one of the prayers that has worked for me goes like this: I have forgiven you, you too have forgiven me. I have forgiven you, you too have forgiven me. You and I are one in God, we are one in God. I love you, you too love me. I love you, you too love me. You and I are one in God, we are one in God. I'm grateful to you, you too are grateful to me. I'm grateful to you, you too are grateful to me. You and I are one in God, we are one in God. There is no longer the slightest ill feeling between you and me. I pray for your happiness from the bottom of my heart. May you be blessed with increasing happiness. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Sounds like a long prayer, but it's really easy. It has 3 parts and 4 parts. So the first 3 part is I've forgiven you, I love you, I'm grateful to you. And it ends, each of them end with you and I are one in God. So it's basically moving beyond you and me to a divine being of sorts. And then it ends with I have no heart, I pray for your happiness and I have nothing against you. Once you I can send the prayer in an email. Once you practice something like this, which is positive affirmation. So Louise Hay has made, she's no more, she made a life and career and a lot of money with the idea of positive affirmation. So prayers and short prayers are basically positive affirmation that help us cultivate some practices, some ideas. So this was for Kshama or forgiveness, and it has helped me over the years. So you can see I know it by heart, and if I have a negative thought about anybody, I would start doing the prayer, and in a few minutes, my negative thoughts are cleared. So we'll also talk about Abhay and Ahimsa. I'll share a wonderful story if you are there. If you have to leave right now, these are the gifts that you are likely to get. Next PowerPoint. And Shilpaji already shared with us what I'm going to cover. But basically, there are 5 parts to the presentation. Paths for leading a harmonious life that we derive from the Bhagavad Gita. Indigenous positive psychological constructs that we can derive from the Bhagavad Gita. Daivik and Asuri Sampadas, how they provide a foundation of positive psychology. And then an integrated theoretical framework, synthesis of positive and negative, and then implications for global psychology. I think by the time I come to the end, I'll basically leave you with the PowerPoints as a teaser, because I'll present some ideas on Western ideas on virtue, value, and positive psychology, and and invite you to think about how what we have discussed can contribute to it. Next PowerPoint. Briefly, the way I do research when I study the Bhagavad Gita or other text, so I use 4 parts. There's always the wisdom of sense guiding, and I'll share with you a story in a minute. I do content analysis, textual analysis that provides the different aspects of the concepts and words. Then I test them in my personal experience. So that's the what we call in psychological research face validity. Does this make sense? If it does not make sense to me personally, then n equals 1, even if it is in the scriptures, in the valued text, it does not make sense, because it doesn't make sense to me in my personal experience. So there's no face validity. But if it makes sense to me, and if I can test in my own experience, in my daily living, in my daily behavior, then it makes sense. So that is my third step in doing research. And finally, synthesizing one text with other texts. Next PowerPoint. Let me share with you quickly a story that a friend shared with me about Swami Chinmayanandji. He was traveling abroad, and when he returned, the young monks or sannyasis under training were very excited, and they told Guruji, Guruji, when you were gone, we went through the Upanishads. And Chinmayanandji, in his natural, humorous way that also was biting at times, said, you morons, you don't go through the Upanishads, you allow the Upanishads to go through you. So when we study the text, in the beginning, we are going through the text. But if we will remember the wisdom of Chinmayanandji, then as we do what we say swadhyay, or studying every day a little bit of the text, as Gandhiji said and did, he studied a few verses of the Bhagavad Gita every day. In his commentary on Bhagavad Gita, which he called Gita Mata, he does say that, quote, I wish I had memorized all the verses, unquote. So he did not make the effort, did not have the time to memorize the verses, but he did recommend that. So basically what happens is, when we go through the verse through the text again and again and again, then the text starts to go through us. That was my understanding of Chinmayanandji's mission, or his message. So read the verses and cantos again and again and let them guide you. We also, of course, need to have shauch and achar, and this will come back, as not having it would be considered asuri sampad. Raman Maharshi had another interesting insight. Somebody asked him before leaving the ashram, Guruji, give me a mantra. And Raman Maharshi said, I don't give mantra. So the person asked, please give me one. And he said, well, there are so many mantras, you can take any. And he said, no, please, you give me one. And he said, there is Gayatri. And then the devotee says, will Gayatri do? And I'm fascinated by Ramana Maharshi's answer. He said, Gayatri is everything. First it will be japa, then it will become dhyan, and then it will become the self. So reading the biographies of saints kind of prepares the ground for us to appreciate the texts. And if all of us who are in the audience, we are interested in positive psychology, then in a way, reading the biographies of saints is also part of our training in positive psychology. Dada Vaswani, in one of his presentations when he was visiting Hawaii, gave us a short prayer, and he said, you can say it every hour. Deen Bandhu Dinanath, Meri Dori Tere Haath. So keep saying it a few times. And if you can remember to say it a few times a day, and then every hour a day, and then kind of all the time. Shipuri Baba, who lived in Nepal, who was originally from Kerala, he used chapter 16 of Bhagavad Gita as his sadhana methodology for his disciples. So that was his message. So that is what gives me confidence in talking about chapter 16 of Bhagavad Gita as the foundation of positive psychology. Next slide, please. Now, when we do content analysis or textual analysis, we look at the words, we looked at synonyms, antonyms, what does it mean, where is it used, how many times it is used, what are other uses, and then we develop nomological network of concepts. And I can share with you some references where I have followed this method to uh, derive the meaning of common everyday words like that we use, like shraddha, like tapas or tapa, and adhyatma. So it is possible to do textual analysis and develop, literal like models, which can be tested. So we all have limited time. So I have been busy developing these models and haven't quite made the time to test them. But for those who are interested, there is a scale on leadership derived from the Bhagavad Gita that I have developed. So feel free to ask me for it, so that, if you want to test what leadership in Indian context would be, there is a scale. Next PowerPoint. To test what we learn from the books, texts, in our experience, we need to use the threefold process of Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. So Shravana is, of course, now replaced by reading the text. And then Manana is the reflective part. And this is where, if you are familiar with Kolb's model, concrete experience should be followed by reflective observation, then abstract conceptualization, then active experimentation. So that reflective observation is manana. What manana allows us to do is then we can test the idea in our own behavior. Am I acting the way I am supposed to be acting? So a simple word like daya, daya bhuteshu, we should have compassion, daya for everybody, every living being. Am I translating it into my behavior? Now, the idea is, if you uh, if you meet an enlightened person like Nisargadatta Maharaj, he has said time and again in his dialogues that, quote, my Guruji told me I am the universe. I believed him, unquote. So he was done. There was no confusion in him, in his behavior. So his daily activity went on as if he was the universe. So how would one act? One would not collect anything. But that is the practice of aparigraha. So nididhyasana is basically translating that thought into idea. But for most of us, we will need to make effort, we'll fail, we'll have to try again. So try controlling your temper, your anger, which, if you keep working on it, will become subtle and will become annoyance, and then you can work on your annoyance. So nididhyasana is basically completing that full cycle of internalizing the concept. Now, let me share with you a story here that may help appreciate the idea. Uh, Yudhishthira, one of the eldest of the Pandavas. So when all the Pandavas were given simple lessons like uh, respect your teacher, don't get angry, speak the truth. The next day, Dronacharya asked people if they had remembered the lesson. Everybody said yes. Yudhishthira said, no, I do not remember the lessons. So he said, okay, that was surprising. What is so difficult about these lessons? The second day he asked and he said, I have learned to respect your teacher, respect your parents. Then on the third day, I have learned speak the truth. And then the fourth day, fifth day, sixth day, a few days went and he's still not learned all the lessons. So as I've heard the story, I have not confirmed it in the Mahabharata, but the stories have their learning values. So even if it is not there in the Mahabharata, knowing the kind of person Yudhishthira was, it kind of makes sense. So Guruji slapped him, and then Yudhishthira said, I have learned the lesson. And so Guruji said, maybe I should have slapped you 2 days back. And he said, no, Guruji, when you hit me, I did not get angry. So, krodh ma kuru, don't get angry. I learned that. That is learning. We not only think about krodha and akrodha, but we translate it into our behavior. So nididhyasana is becoming one with the thought and practice, and it shows in our achar, and sadhana is needed to test what we are learning in our personal experience. Next PowerPoint. And then finally, we should synthesize with other texts and Western constructs. So this is the kind of four-part methodology that I always use. Next PowerPoint. Now we are getting into what I promised you first, the first deliverable of the presentation, paths for leading a harmonious life. Next PowerPoint. What you see in the PowerPoint, if you can see it, and you do not have to take notes because I have shared the PowerPoint with Shilpaji and Kamleshji, and they can post it on our website, so you'll have access to it. But basically what you see here are like two blocks. On the left side, we have the 6 forces that destabilize us. So in our worldview, we talk about kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, and matsara. So desire, anger, greed, attachment, pride, and jealousy. So these are the 6 distractors. These are shad ripu. These are our 6 enemies. What they do is they kind of pull us into the material world. They make us act in a not nice way. So the Bhagavad Gita offers 4 paths: the path of karma yoga, the path of bhakti yoga, the path of dhyana yoga, and the path of jnana yoga. And when we use each of this path, so if you follow in the bottom, it says if you follow the path, yes, then it provides a feedback loop. And basically what happens is we start to shed those weaknesses. Visualize in the neti process. I'm a father, I'm a professor, I have a big house, I have a big car, I have so much money. And then you say, that is not me, that is not me, that is not me. So it's almost like when we interact in the material world, our social self is constantly growing. It's what we call in psychology identity. So we have a complex identity, what the wise Buddha said, nama rupa. So we have multiple nama and rupa. And the purpose of the 4 paths is basically to slowly dismantle them so that we can experience the Atman or the self. You can find a description of this in my book in chapter 8. So I remember I said I'm going to kind of bring some information to you. So this is one of the contributions of Bhagavad Gita. It does not present one path, but 4 paths, and they are all synthesized. And of course, in the end, you can follow any one of the paths. Next slide. Now we are going to review some of the indigenous positive psychological constructs that are present in the Bhagavad Gita. Next slide. So the first one, which was one of your parting gift, I said, there is no absence of truth or no presence of untruth. Sometimes it's good to read the original words. Na sato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate satah, ubhayorapi drishtah antah tu anayos tattvadarshibhi. So there is no absence of truth or presence of untruth, and the wise people, knowing this, go beyond both. So in a way, we rise beyond all social constructions. We'll revisit this. I'll call this kind of the world view. So Bhagavad Gita provides uh, a world view in which everything is positive. There is no absence of truth and there is no presence of untruth. And I've also give you reference about where you would find this, the verses. The Bhagavad Gita talks about Atman from in the second canto, and you are aware of it, you have heard about it. Nothing, weapons cannot cut it, water cannot wet it, fire cannot destroy it. So it is self that kind of goes beyond the material conception. It provides us another interesting concept called Swadharma. And what it basically says is, if we perform our Swadharma, we would not be tied by the bondage of the world. So that's a positive construct. And you would notice that in Bhagavad Gita, all the positive constructs are leading us towards liberation, towards living in the world as a Jivan Mukta. Another worldview, all is well, capturing verse, says there's no loss of effort or side effect. And I find this one fascinating. It comes with such a force. Na iha avikrama nasho asti pratyavayo na jayate swalpam api asya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. So it says there is no loss of effort. This is an interesting promise. There is, in everything, if you stop the effort, you start to lose what you started. But Krishna guarantees that if you are following the path of sadhana, there is no backward slide. Whatever progress you have made, we stay there. Na iha avikrama nasho asti. Avikram is the stepwise progress. There is no loss of that. Pratyavayo na vidyate, and there is no side effect. So doing sadhana has no side effect. And even if you practice a little bit of this, it's going to save you from big fears. So again, this is a worldview that all is well. Nothing will go wrong. Whatever little effort I have made is going to be there forever. And it's almost like you can take a hiatus. You may do some bad things. You may slip in your effort, but if you keep making the effort, you will start from the place you had left before. That's, I think, is a very positive way of looking at the world, at life. Next PowerPoint. The Bhagavad Gita is, of course, known for the doctrine of Nishkama Karma, and we'll revisit that in a little bit more detail. We have another famous saying from the Bhagavad Gita, Samatvam Yoga Uchyate. So Patanjali describes yoga as Yogaschitta Vritti Nirodha. So when we control the vritti, the outgoing nature of our chitta, our manas, then we are connected with the self. So that's Yogaschitti Vritti Nirodha. The Bhagavad Gita says, Samatvam Yoga Uchyate. If we are in samatva, if we are in harmony all the time, then that is yoga. It also, Bhagavad Gita emphasizes action. So it also says yoga karmashu kaushalam. So if we are performing our karma with samatvam, with equanimity, then that is yoga. So we can constantly be in our work, but if we are constantly harmonious in our work, then that is yoga. It also gives us another interesting concept called sthit prajna, which is described at the end of the second canto. Next PowerPoint. It describes the concept of Lok Sangra. It only appears in 2 verses, but the idea is so known to us culturally. The only name that Krishna gives as example is that of King Janaka. But if you look around, we see India is known to have had the most number of social entrepreneurs who are celebrated worldwide. So we have this tradition of serving the community. So Lok Sangra is basically helping people correct their behavior. So a wise person's duty is to guide people and create a system so that people can follow it. The Bhagavad Gita discusses yajna and how yajna is of all kinds. So basically, in summary, everything is yajna. All our actions are yajna. Eating, sleeping, breathing, everything is yajna. If we bring it that thought process, if we look at it, then it becomes a yajna. Bhagavad Gita talks about abhyas and vairagya as the method to calm the mind in the 6th canto. There's a whole chapter, chapter 17 gives us different meanings of Shraddha. So there's a thick description of it, and I have written a paper that I can share with you. In chapter 18, if you are a sadhaka, you are doing meditation and japa, you tend to become, at least I tend to become calm, so calm that I am not interested in doing any activity. And there's a positive lesson from the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 18. Krishna says, Sattvic karma is characterized by dhriti utsaha samanvita. So when we are doing our action, we should be patient, we should have dhairya, but we should also have utsaha. So whenever I feel that I lack some energy, like this moment, then I will bring energy in my presentation or whatever I'm doing. In chapter 18, there's another positive construct, swe swe karmani avirata. By being busy in our own activity, we can offer that activity itself to the God inside us. Now, to me, that's a beautiful way of living. Anything we are doing, we offer it to God, not outside us, within us. One of the things that I did not put here in chapter 17, Krishna also says that anything we do, if we start by saying Om Tat Sat, that activity becomes pious. So think about it. Anything you do all day long, before you start an activity, you say Om Tat Sat, and that's it. You have made that activity positive. Well, basically, I think what would happen is you would not want to hurt other people by saying Om Tat Sat. So Om Tat Sat would probably purify your mind and you would not want to do negative activity. Next PowerPoint. So far, I have kind of given you a list of positive constructs in Bhagavad Gita. And now I want to give you a little bit detail about Atman in the Indian concept of self and how that is a positive concept. Next PowerPoint. So I'm going to share with you 2 similar PowerPoints. In the first one, I'm drawing, so this diagram basically is derived from this 42nd verse of the 3rd canto, where Krishna says that the senses are more powerful than the material world. That's why the senses go and visit it. And we have 5 senses: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. More powerful than the senses is the manasa. So in the wise Buddha called the manas the 6th indriya. And if manas is not attached, that's when we are absent-minded and we may see but not see. So eyes may see but because the manas is not with it, we will not register it. The ears may hear, but the manas is not attached, so we may not hear. So manas is more subtle than the senses, but it's also more powerful. And then he says, buddhi is more powerful than manas. So in the Indian worldview, manas is sankalpa vikalpatmak. So the manas decides whether to do something or not to do something. And the buddhi decides what is good and what is not good. So buddhi is more subtle and therefore more powerful. And the Atman, so in the verse, the word Atman is not used. So third person, it is used, and it, meaning that self, Atman, is subtler and more powerful than buddhi. So you can see the reason I think our worldview itself is positive is because we do not look at the body as the self. We do not look at the senses as the self. We do not look at the manas as the self, the buddhi as the self. So we are a sanghat, a combination of all these things. And so this is a complex concept of self, but it is fundamentally positive because there is Atman that cannot be destroyed, that cannot be burned, that lives on forever. So that is why Vivekananda addressed the audience by saying, children of nectar. So we are all children of nectar. We are all children of divine. So in the idea of Brahma and Jeev, we are the reflection of Brahma. And that's why we say, I am Brahma, Aham Brahmasmi. So that is a positive concept of self. If we can visualize that, we would be leading a positive life. Our behaviors would be positive. That's the basic idea why I'm belaboring the point that even the concept of self, Indian concept of self, is positive. Next slide, please. I think you missed one. Go back. Yes. So here, basically what I have done is I have looked at another verse, 7.4 in Bhagavad Gita, where the concept of ahankara is also presented. So now you have the physical self, the sense organs, the manas, the ahankara, the buddhi, and atman. And so this combination is what makes up self, but we are not limited to the physical self. And in that sense, the Bhagavad Gita offers us a concept of self. The Indian worldview offers us a concept of self which is positive. Next PowerPoint. So I'm not going to dwell a lot on this, but the basic message here is that when we are engaged in the world, when we are attached in the world, we are kind of, I think, therefore I am. The social self is ever expanding, which is on the right side. But when we start reducing the social self, we start focusing on the Atman, then we start kind of reducing the self, but that reduction also becomes infinite in the sense, I am the universe. So Aham Brahmasmi is the making the self subtle so that it becomes infinity. So in either direction, in the material sense and the spiritual sense, the self is expanding to infinity. Next PowerPoint. Here I give examples of the physical self, the social self, and the metaphysical self or Atman. And I use the example of the verses from Shankaracharya, where every verse ends with Shivoham, Shivoham, Shivoham. So I'll let you kind of, go through it yourself. But basic idea is that we do have social self, and the social self is expanding. And the practice of adhyatma basically makes the social self becomes less relevant, and we start the internal journey. Next PowerPoint. We have here, now I'm comparing Western social psychology in that's one area where I've also done some work with individualism and collectivism, and how the elements of growing social self, I'm wealthy, I own a big house, I drive a luxury car, I'm famous, kind of thing. So these are your examples of independent self. But you also have interdependent self, uh, where you are, I'm a father, I'm a mother. You can't be both. I'm a parent, I'm a student, I'm a teacher, etc. Whereas you also have independent concept of self. I'm intelligent, I'm hardworking. So all of this kind of is expanding our self. It is layers of identity that we create. As the wise Buddha said, we are a collection of nama rupa, and we need to unbundle ourselves. Next PowerPoint. And here I simply, in this one, I'm trying to show how self-efficacy only focuses on the element of growing social self and element of independent self. But if we look at the Indian concept of self, we are open to so many other ideas that we otherwise miss. Next PowerPoint, please. So far we have basically looked at the Indian concept of self briefly, and how that itself is a positive construct. Now, the doctrine of Nishkam Karma, which is one of the themes of the Bhagavad Gita. So, Arjuna asks, who is Sthit Pragya? And Krishna explains, a person without desire, a person who is content in self, whose senses are under control. And for that person, sorrow, happiness, attachment, fear, anger, gain, loss, fortune, misfortune, they all tend to zero, meaning that the person does not have any of these things. And the person acts with buddhi fixed on Atman. So now visualize the concept of self, the diagram that I shared with you. So buddhi is next to Atman. And if buddhi is turned inward, then it sees Atman. If it is turned outward, it sees Manas. And then through the Manas, it goes to the Indriyas and the world. So the process of Adhyatma is that internal lookingness, internal focus. So if we do all the outward action by looking inward, act with buddhi focused on Atman, then that becomes a sadhana. And that is when we start to shrink our social self or dismantle our nama rupa. Next slide, please. So here, basically Nishkam Karma is presented diagram in a schematic, and I think my arrows have vanished for some reason. So you have the self starts with, are you performing swadharma? If you say no, then that leads to apayasha or papa. If you say yes, then you come to the next decision point. Is your intention sakama? If you say yes, then you are pursuing karma phala, and that is the path on the top, karma bandhana. So that leads to the growing self, attachments, collecting things. But if we said, is your intention sakama, no to that, then that means you are doing nishkam karma. Then that is the path that leads to the shrinking of the social self, physical self, and you are realizing the internal self. So that is, the person is asakta or mukta sangha. So you can see we can build models like this, but this model basically captures nishkam karma. And all the links between the different blocks in the diagram are supported by some of the verses in the Bhagavad Gita. So here we have a model of self, work, and spirituality, and we see the path of bondage and liberation. So Nishkam Karma is not pursuing the karma phala. Sometimes it can be confusing that if I have earned it, do I not deserve it? Uh, yes, we deserve it, but there are many slips between the cup and the lip, and that's what is captured by this doctrine. And it takes the energy away from the outcome and puts the energy in the action itself, and that is why it is a calming process in itself. So Nishkam Karma takes the nervousness out, takes the uncertainties out. Will I get it or not? So that anticipation is gone. If I get it, fine. If I don't get it, fine. That's the approach. And that's basically like becoming a sports person. In the sports field, you play. Winning or losing is an outcome that will be decided when the referee blows the final whistle and time is over. But you keep trying till the last minute. And as Yogi Berra said, it ain't over until it's over. So unless the game is over, the game is still being played. So Nishkam Karma helps us kind of uh, act without being concerned about its outcomes. Next PowerPoint. So in the next two PowerPoints, I'll basically summarize what I have, mentioned earlier. So all is well, worldview is provided, all is positive, there is no negative, is provided by Bhagavad Gita. I already shared these two verses with you. Na sato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate satah, uvayorapi drishta antah tu anayohos tattvadarshivip. There is no absence of truth and there is no presence of untruth. The wise ones, by understanding this, go beyond both. Na iha avikramanasho asti pratyavayo na vidyate swalpam api asya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. There is no loss of progress, there is no loss of effort, and there is no side effect. When you take a medicine, it has side effect, but sadhana has no side effect, no negative side effect. And even doing a little bit of it helps us deal with big fears of life. Next PowerPoint. In the sixth canto, Sri Krishna says, Parth naiveha namutra vinashah tasya vidyate nahi kalyan krit kaschit durgating tata gachati. One who does sadhana, where a devotee or a dhyan margi or a jnana margi or a karma yogi, the person never loses in this world or the world beyond, in this life or life beyond. What a guarantee. I mean, that's positive. In ninth canto, Sri Krishna says, Kshipram bhavati dharmatma shashvata shanting nigacchati kaunteya pratijanihi name bhakta pranashyati. My devotee soon becomes dharmatma, soon becomes wise, never loses. So, this is the all is well worldview. Let's make small efforts today, even a small thing. Let's forgive somebody who did something bad to us. That's the message. Let's share compassion with somebody. Let's not worry about why is somebody begging. Let's just give something to the beggar. Vivekananda said something profound. Be grateful to the beggar because the beggar is giving you the opportunity to practice compassion. So giving to the beggar is basically helping us practice compassion. That's why in Thailand and in the Southeast Asian countries, you'll see that the monks come in the morning begging and people line up to give them arms. So this is, the monk is providing you the opportunity to practice compassion. So the world view is positive. Next PowerPoint, please. So far we have covered two aspects: how the Bhagavad Gita presents four models that help us live harmoniously, lead a positive life; how the Bhagavad Gita presents us a number of positive constructs. So we have done these two. And so now we are coming to the third point, uh, how the Bhagavad Gita provides the foundation of positive psychology by presenting us the Daivik Sampada and also the Asuri Sampada. So here in positive psychology, there has been some criticism. So people have criticized positive psychology as neglecting the reality of life. You cannot only focus on positive. And what is fascinating about the Bhagavad Gita is that it focuses on both the positive and negative in one chapter and gives us what is Daivik Sampada in 3 verses, but explains what is Asuri Sampada in 11 verses, and then concludes by saying that if you follow the Asuri qualities, you'll keep coming back life after life after life. And if you follow the Devi Sampada, you will get out of the cycle of life and death. Next PowerPoint, please. So the 3 verses that describe the Devi Sampada, verse 1 to 3 of Bhagavad Gita, I will chant it for you. Abhayam sattva samsuddhihi jnana yoga vyavasthitihi danang damascha yajyascha swadhyayastapa arjavam ahimsa satyam akrodhah tyagah shantihi apaishunam daya bhuteshu aloluptvam mardavam hri achapalam tejah क्षमा धृति शौचम अद्रोहो नातिमानिता Bhavanti sampadam daivim avijatasya bharata. So if you count, there are 26 virtues, there are 26 Daivik qualities, Daivik Sampada, that we should cultivate. So here Adi Shankara and other enlightened saints in the past, what they have said is that what is the characteristics of an enlightened person? The same characteristics are sadhana path for other people. So a saint, an enlightened person, does not have a bhaya, does not have fear. So you and I have to cultivate abhaya. So we don't get it naturally like the saint does. So this is the point. The characteristics of an enlightened person provides the pathway for other people. So that is the guiding philosophy about every time you hear in the scriptures the positive qualities, positive constructs. The idea is you will find those in the enlightened people, but you and I need to cultivate them. So we need to cultivate abhaya, we need to cultivate sattva samsuddhi, we need to cultivate jnana yoga vyavasthiti, we need to cultivate dan, we need to cultivate dhamma, we need to cultivate yajna, swadhyaya, tapa, arjava. And many of these words are constructs are known to you, and some may need explanation. Next PowerPoint. So what I have done here is I have categorized the 26 Daivik Sampadas into 2 groups. One group is negation of negative. So bhaya is negative, fear. So we are making a positive attribute out of it by saying fearlessness. And this happens in all languages. Dhamma is subduing what? The negative tendencies. So we are focusing on negative tendencies, but then we are saying we have to dominate, we have to subdue the negative tendencies. The mind running around, we have to subdue it. That is Dhamma. Ahimsa. Himsa is violence. We should not have violence. Akrodha. Krodha is anger, where we want to hurt somebody who has insulted us, who has said something wrong, who has done something wrong. Akrodha is basically saying not having anger toward the person who has said something bad, who has done something bad, who has meant something bad to us. Apaishunam. So Pishun is criticizing others, backbiting others. So Apaishun, not doing that. So you can see there is a not and the negative concept. So that's the double negative. Loluptvam is being attached to things. Aloluptvam, not being attached to things. Chapalam is, chapalata is mind running around, not being steady. Achapalam is being steady. Droha is when we have something against somebody. We go against somebody. We want to do some harm to somebody. Adroha, not doing that. Manita is seeking praise. Atimanita is seeking a lot of praise. Na atimanita, not seeking too much praise, not seeking praise. So you can see abhayam, damaha, ahimsa, krodha, apaishunam, aloluptam, achapalam, adroha, na atimanita. So these 9, so 9 of the 26 are really double negation. So there are things that we should not do. And I think ahimsa is the best example of that. And I'll talk a little bit about ahimsa. I'll share with you a story. Other 19 constructs are positive. So you can see even the Daivik Sampada is divided into not doing certain negative things and doing certain positive things. So there are 9 no-nos and there are 17 yes. So the 17 yes positive habits that we need to cultivate. The first one is Sattva Samsuddhi. So we need to, in Indian culture, Shuddhi, Shauch is very important. It will come again in this, of the 17, the last one is Shaucham. So Sattva Samsuddhi is purifying our internal organ or antahkarana. So Sattva Samsuddhi. So Shuddhi, purification, Samshuddhi, purifying completely or well, and Sattva Samshuddhi, purifying our internal organ, antahkarana, which includes mana, buddhi, and ahankara. So Sattva Samsuddhi, we have to make effort to purify ourselves. Jnana Yoga Vyavasthiti, we should be avasthita, situated, vyavasthita, nicely situated in Jnana Yoga. So we should constantly be aware that I am the self, Aham Brahmasmi. We should be situated in that thought all the time. You can see this is going to require effort. That is the point of Indian positive psychology coming from Bhagavad Gita. Abhyas and Vairagya. Abhyas, effort, is important. By the way, for the psychologists, and probably all of us are psychologists in the audience, Carol Dweck's work on mindset, growth mindset and fixed mindset. Fixed mindset is thinking I'm smart, I have this ability, that ability. Growth mindset is basically making effort to learn a skill, and that is the foundation of Bhagavad Gita and Indian culture. We believe in effort. And so these positive qualities come with effort. With, with the enlightened one, it becomes natural, but for everybody else, we have to make effort. Danam is giving others. Yajya, as I said, there is a big description of what yajya is, but there are pancha yajyas, and it permeates our daily living. So in our worldview, everything we do is a yajna. Swadhyaya, we should study positive literature every day. So Swadhyaya also includes japa. So because japa is, so if you're doing Gayatri, every day for a certain time, then basically internally you are chanting, or if you're chanting aloud Mahamantra, then so that is part of Swadhyaya. I think in the modern Western psychological perspective, part of japa is basically positive affirmation. So you can visualize how we have known about positive affirmation for centuries. Tapa, I can send you a paper. Bhagavad Gita gives us many aspects of tapa, but this is training ourselves. So think about sports people. Their sadhana is very clear, or the musicians playing tabla 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the evening, from the age of 9 for the great tabla player Zakir Hussain. So that is tapa. Arjavam comes from Riju, which is straight, and it basically means simplicity. So speaking the truth is part of Arjavam. Not hiding anything from anybody is part of Arjavam. It does not mean speaking unpleasant truth. So that's why we have the guidance very clear, Satyam Vada, Priyam Vada. So Arjavam does not mean saying not nice things to people. In fact, that is considered one of the Asuri Sampada. We'll come to that. Satyam, truth. And many times, many of these virtues we have to understand by breaking it into 3 parts. So Satya in thought, in speech, and in action. So we need to practice. So Shauch, which is coming at the end of the list, also will be in behavior, in speech, and in the mind. So we need to purify ourselves at 3 levels. We need to practice Satya at 3 levels. Tyaga is not getting attached to anything and to be able to give up the attachments. Now you can see how the culture has included some of these practices. So I think in Andhra Pradesh and or Tamil Nadu, so some of the southern states, if you go to Vishwanath Darshan, then you have to give up one of your attachments. So if you like to eat a particular food, you should give up that. When we do Shraddha for our parents, which I did in 2012 in Gaya, then there is tradition that you should give up one of your dear attachments in memory of your parents. So we gave up eating the fruit pear. So it's that's tyaga. So there are many aspects. The culture has integrated tyaga in many ways. Shanti does not need explanation. Both shanti inside us and outside us in our relationship. Daya Bhuteshu, I mentioned that earlier, compassion to all people, all living beings, insects, animals, trees, everything. Bhuteshu, not only to human beings, but for everything. You can see how all encompassing it is. Mardavam from Ridu, Komalta, gentleness. So be gentle in your action, be gentle in your speech, be gentle in your thought. Re, Lajja. I've written a few papers on it, and Lajja is also name of Devi. And basically, Lajja guides us into doing what is appropriate, and it also guides us into avoiding what is not appropriate. So, doing what is appropriate, if the thought arises about not doing it, then Lajja comes. And if we pay attention, then we would not feel Lajja and therefore do what we should do. So, we should not insult our parents, we should not insult our teachers. So if a thought comes that I should say this to my teacher, and immediately Lajja would come and say, that would not be good. And if I catch that, then I will not say it. So Lajja has helped me in doing what I should do and not doing what I should not do. Teja is effulgence, is glow. And we know when people do tapas, they have teja. Kshama, forgiveness. And in our tradition, Mother Earth is the most kshami. She is the most forgiving. We trample on her, but she forgives us. So that should be our gold standard. Whatever is done to us, we shall forgive that person. Dhriti is being sthir, being stable, and shaucham is purification. So there are 17 positive and 9 things that we should not do. So they make 26 Daivik Sampada. Next slide, please. So I want to dwell just a little bit on 2 or 3 of these positive qualities. So if we reflect on Abhayam, so let's think about, I think Abhayam is a prerequisite for dialogue. If I'm afraid of you, I cannot have dialogue with you. So this whole idea of, fear is the key may work in the short run, but in the long run, we have to have abhaya. We cannot have fear of anybody or anything and have a positive relationship. So I identify here some of the fears. Role-related fear, fear of union. Managers are always afraid of union leaders. Fear of management. Union people, workers are always afraid of management. Fear of teacher, fear of student. The student will insult me. Fear of parent for children. Fear of children for parents. Fear of ideology, of communism. Fear of nation, China. What if this happens, that happens? So fear is generated from all these. So these are role-related fears. Fear of losing what we have. This is another fundamental fear. What we have, we want to hold on to it. So we are fearful that we may lose it. Fear of not getting what we do not have. This is another fear, fundamental type. So what we don't have, we want, and then we have a fear that we may not get it. Fear of failure. If we do an action, we may not achieve the outcome. So that causes fear. Fear of learning. We have learning handicap. So because it takes effort and time to learn something, it develops fear. And if we have bad experience, then bad experience we want to avoid. So then we develop fear of learning. Fear of other people. So, there is misogynists don't like women. And so we have fear of different, people, different things, fear of different culture. If you do not know about Chinese culture, you are afraid of it. You may have fear of Islam because you don't know about it. But if you meet people who are nice and you understand them, then you start seeing that, we have differences, but we also can be nice people. Fear of unknown, fear of coming out of insecurity. So I don't have this, I don't feel secure. That's fear. Fear creates Guantanamo Bay prison. So America has fear of people who would attack it. So we have created a prison in Guantanamo Bay. Fear created emergency in India in 1974. Fearless life. I mean, think about martyrs live fearless life. They die for the cause. Social reformers live fearless life. Whistleblowers live fearless life. So it is when we are able to get over our fear, we become reformers, we become martyrs, we become whistleblowers. There are social science theories that pertain to fear. So Bandura's social learning theory developed out of studying phobia, which comes out of fear of something. There's also terror management theory. If you are not aware of it, you should look up. It provides us an idea. And the idea is that when we fear something, when we think about death, then we act in our most basic way. So if our basic way is to get angry with somebody and we think about death, we'll get angry. But there's a beautiful study done in Iran that when people were socialized to be compassionate and then they were exposed to death in an experimental study, then they were primed with death, they were socialized with compassion, then as predicted by terror management theory, in these participants, compassion was aroused. So this study is, caught my attention, and I think it's valuable for anybody who is interested in positive psychology. So think about it this way: if we become sweet to our core, then if, according to terror management theory, fear is aroused, sweetness will come out of us. So this is like saying that if you squeeze a mango, only sweet mango juice will come out. If you squeeze orange, only sweet orange juice will come out. So understanding abhaya, fear, helps us cultivate fearlessness, or understanding bhaya helps us cultivate abhaya. Next PowerPoint. Abhayam and Sthit Pragya. So in verse 2.56, Krishna says, let me read the verse to you. Beautiful verse. Dukheshu anudvignamanaha sukheshu vigataspriha vitarag bhayakrodha sthitadhihi muni uchyate. So one who has gone beyond rag, attachment, krodh, anger, and bhaya, that person is sthit prajna. So you can see the positive and negative are synthesized. So to be sthit prajna, we have to go beyond fears. Abhayam and Mukti in 5.28. So, you can see it is spread all across the Bhagavad Gita and synthesized into different verses. So in 5.28, Sri Krishna says, Yatendriya mano buddhi munih moksha parayana vigat iksha bhaya krodha yah sada mukta eva saha. So one who is bigat, who has gone beyond iksha, desire, krodh, anger, and bhaya. So iksha, bhaya, krodha. So in 256, a person who goes beyond these is said to be sthit pragya. In 528, a person who goes beyond bhaya, krodha, and iksha is said to be mukta. And this is what I had shown you in the PowerPoint, where I had the path of liberation and path of attachment, or path of bandhana, mukta. Abhaya is natural. So in 10.4 and 10.5, Krishna says, Buddhi jnana sammoha kshama satyam dama shamah sukhang dukkhang bhavah abhavah bhayang cha abhayam eva cha ahimsa samata tushti tapah danam yasha ayashah bhavanti bhava bhutanam matta eva prithak vida. All these bhavas, all these experiences come from me. So, these are all natural, but we have to make effort to get over them. So I hope it gives you some insight about the importance of abhayam. Next slide, please. Arjavam is comes from Riju, straightforwardness. And I want to share with you what Rumi said. So one of his, the insightful Rumi, in one of his poems, he ends by saying, sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment. So I tell my students in positive psychology class that, of course, you are an MBA student or a BBA student when I'm teaching undergraduates. So I'm teaching you cleverness. All these strength, weakness, opportunity, threat analysis, all these analytical tools you are getting is making you clever compared to those who don't know it. That's what will make you a smart business manager. So after you have learned all these things, all this cleverness, get your BBA, MBA, then come to me and I will teach you positive psychology, and then I will teach you how to be bewildered. And the idea is we need to become simple. So we need to sell our cleverness. We first have to have cleverness to sell it. So we acquire cleverness, we acquire the way of the world. We become, Aristotle calls it the virtue of being witty in the world, being practical in the world. So we get all that. But Rumi said, then we have to get rid of it. We have to sell it off. And that's what Arjavam is about. Being bewildered means, wow, what a blessing to have this audience who's been listening to me for an hour, 15 minutes now, hour, 25 minutes now. So, if you get something, wow. If you don't get something, wow, that's interesting. Somebody else wants it. Oh, that is how people get it. So, always accepting what comes to us. So, to me, that is arjavam, being simple, being direct. Next PowerPoint. Everybody in the audience knows about ahimsa. Gandhiji made Satya and Ahimsa two of his practices, and he became who he became. With all his criticism, there was a great person there who was a practitioner, who was a practitioner of his belief. So he was a traditional person. He was a traditional Hindu who practiced studying Bhagavad Gita and translating the lesson into his behavior. And he focused on two. So let me share with you an interesting story. One of my friends who is a great scholar, trained in the Gurukul tradition, shared this with me. So we had enlightened saint in Nepal, and my friend used to visit him. And then, he used to ask him question. And one day he asked a question and Baba answered it. So, he went by name of a place. Khaptar Baba means he was from Khaptar, or he lived in Khaptar for some time. So he asked him a question and Baba answered the question by giving him references to the texts. So, as a young scholar, he's like, man, I have worked hard to memorize and learn all these scriptures and who said what in what text, in what verse, and how does Baba know all this? So he asked Baba, how do you know this? How do you remember this? And Baba smiled and said, oh, I studied it about 50, 60 years ago. And so that was even more impressive to my friend that, he studied 60 years ago and he still remembers it. Don't get lost in the story. It has many layers, but when I come to the end, then you will appreciate the message I'm trying to convey. So stay with me. So one day Baba told my friend, why don't you come towards a little bit later in the evening when people start leaving, then you will be one-on-one with me because the questions you ask don't interest other people. They are academic in nature, but they interest you and they interest me, and I'm happy to answer it. So my friend was very happy that, Baba is giving me personal time. So he was very happy to go a little bit later and then stay with Baba and then ask his questions. And this continued for some time. And then one day when he was returning from the ashram, he was shocked. He suddenly realized that Baba answered his question without the question being asked. He didn't ask the question. He had thought about the question and Baba answered it. So he said, is Baba messing with me? Is he hypnotizing me? What is he doing with me? So next day he wrote the question. Now he could not even wait for a few days gap. We went home, he wrote a question, put it at home, did not bring with him, came, sat, and Baba answered the question without him asking the question. And maybe he hypnotized me. And I forget, if you've seen Men in Black, they zap you and then you forget what happened to you a moment ago. So he went to three friends and said, okay, I'm writing this question. You are not seeing this question. Only I know the question. And the question is at your home. We'll four of us go. Nobody will ask a question and we'll see what Baba does. And Baba answered the question. So they all came home. The three others opened the envelope, found the question, said, yes, Baba answered the question. So these other three people became great devotee of Baba. But my friend is a scholar and a sadhak, and he's a wonderful person. Not because he's my friend, he's a wonderful person and my friend. So he decided to confront Baba. And so everybody who thinks that we just trust people, we trust our guru and our enlightened people, this is not really our tradition. We confront them, we ask them direct questions. So the next day, my friend went and he said, Baba, I realized that you have been answering my question without me asking it to you. And Baba smiled and said, yes. So my friend was not satisfied with that only. He said, Baba, teach me the art. And Baba said, you cannot learn it. And my friend did not stop there. He said, Baba, why can I not learn it? And then what Baba said is the message of this whole story that I have been, saying for a few minutes now. Baba said, when ahimsa becomes mature, when your sadhana of ahimsa reaches its fruition, then there is no gap between self and other. Please pay attention. When ahimsa becomes siddha, becomes matured, there is no gap between self and other. Because so long there is self and other, you may hurt the other because you may do violence to other. We don't try to hurt ourselves, but we hurt others. So there is no difference between self and other. That is the indication that your ahimsa has matured completely, has become siddha. In that state, what is in the manas of the other person, because there is no other, is in your own manas. So mind reading is not an art, it's becoming one with the universe. Aham Brahmasmi. So you can see, practicing ahimsa can lead to becoming one with others, becoming one with the universe. I will let you reflect on this, mull over this, but this is how deep each of the 26 Daivik Sampadas are. Cultivating any one of them can transform our life. Next slide, please. So now here I basically have just a few words about all the Daivik Sampadas. Akrodha, violence in action, speech; annoyance, violence in thought; Apaishanum, criticizing others; why put positive energy in negative channels. One of my mentors, I once told him, Lane, you don't have jealousy. And he responded, Bhavuk, why put positive energy into negative channel? So when we criticize others, we are putting positive energy into negative channel. Aloluptvam, if I am the universe, I am that I am, why would I want anything? Achapalam, conquer the world, do X, then Y, then Z. It goes on ad infinitum. So, achapalam is not getting into that, uh, doing one after another. Adroha, one-upmanship, survival of the fittest myth. Natural cooperation is ignored and competition is emphasized. So we have droh. Next slide, please. Now we come to Asuri Sampada, what to avoid. So it's interesting. There are 52 indicators. There are 6 that Sri Krishna says are Asuri Sampada. So we'll look at those 6. Then in the next 12 verses, he gives many examples of how Asuri Sampada is reflected in our behavior. What do people who have Asuri Swabhava act? And I think this is really important because what we have done is we have looked at Daivik Sampada, which has 2 parts. Don't do 9 things and cultivate 17 virtues. So that's 26. Asuri Sampada basically tells us what not to do and gives us a long list of it. Next slide, please. So there are 6 major constructs that are given in 16.4 verse. Next slide, please. So the first one is Dambha. And I think you probably understand all the words. Dambha, Darpa, Atiman, or Abhiman. Next slide. Krodha, Parushyam, and Ajnana. So let's go from bottom up. Ajnana, not knowing the self. Sri Ramakrishna said it beautifully. When Sri Ma, when he asked, why don't you bring your wife to visit with me? He said, she's a jnani. So Sri Ramakrishna said, are you a jnani? And then Sri Ma was stuck. He could not say, I am a jnani. So Sri Ramakrishna explained, one who knows the self is a jnani. So the definition of jnani is one who knows the self. So Agyan is not knowing the self and thinking that this body is me, thinking that what I do causes things, the universe, I'm having an impact on the universe, etc. So, those are all cause of Ajyan. Adi Shankara defines Ajyan as aviveka. So, what we should do, Ajyan leads to not doing it, and what we should not do, Ajyan leads to doing it. So, in our behavior, it's translated as aviveka. Parushyam refers to Parushvachana. So this is like using akshepa to tell somebody who is not good looking that you are very good looking, as a satire, this is, I think in management, we talk about being tough, and I think that is Parushyam. Contrast that with compassion. Instead of being tough on people, we should have compassion for people. So that's why Parushyam is Asuri Sampada. Krodha is self-explanatory. Let's go back to the previous slide for a change. We have been going forward, yes. So Dambha, Adi Shankara describes as Dharma Dhvajitvam, showing off that I am, a good person. So that is Dambha. Or Swadharma Prakati Karanam, showing off, how good I am. I'm a good person. So that is dambha. Darpa is pride, taking pride in I'm from a good family, taking pride from I'm from a good school, taking pride from I'm wealthy or I have wealth. So, our material qualities, taking pride in it, in them, in each of them is darpa. And atiman or abhiman is already, we talked about it. Man is, you know, to seek praise, and atiman is to seek a lot of praise. So these six, dambha, darpa, atiman or abhiman, next PowerPoint, krodha, parushyam, and ajnana, these are ashuri sampada, and we have to work against them. Now you see how the positive and negative are integrated. Krodha is ashuri sampada, akrodha is daivi sampada, and it was one of the things we should not do. So we have a link there. No atiman is a daivi sampada, atiman is a asuri sampada. So there is a link there. So we can see that, daivi sampada and asuri sampada kind of are related. Asuri sampada is something we should avoid, we should cultivate not to do. And daivi sampada is something that we should cultivate to do. Next PowerPoint. So in verse 16.7 to 16.18, Asuri Sampada is examples of it are given, and I'm going to go over them quickly. So let's go to the next PowerPoint. So Asuri Sampada means pravritti abhav. You do not have the tendency to do what you should do. And nibritti abhav, you also do not have the tendency of not doing what you should not do. So what is to be done should be done, but you lack that. And what should not be done should not be done. And you also lack that break. So you don't have break. You don't break what you should, and you break what you should not. So pravriti abhav and nivriti abhav. Shauch abhav, we have already seen shauch is a Devi Sampada, and for the Asuri Sampada, there is absence of it. Achar abhav, your behavior is not proper. Satya abhav, Satya is a Devi Sampada, Asuri Sampada, there is absence of Satya. Next PowerPoint. We have already talked about abhav of Satya, and then in the next verse he says, those who have Asuri Sampada believe in Asatyam. They believe in apratishtham. There is no pratishtha. There is no foundation for the world. That's their worldview. So, you can see Asuri Sampada has a worldview that there is no truth. There is no foundation for this world. There is no foundation. There's nothing out there. It's all Anishwaram. There is no controller of the universe. There is no intelligence that controls the universe. And aparaspara sambhutvam, it's basically coming out of sexual desire, procreation desire for procreation. Men and women have sex and children are born. The seeds bring forth life. So there's no intelligence, no Ishwar. So it's basically the Asuri Sampad believes, this is one of the fundamental thoughts. They are Nastikas. They do not believe that there is a being that is kind, compassionate, and running things and causing things. Next PowerPoint. Nashta Atmana, they are kind of, hurt themselves. Alpa Buddhya, they have, little buddhi, they don't use their buddhi properly. Ugra Karmana, they are doing, Ugra Karma, I think you can just understand, rash actions. Kshayaya Jagata, they hurt the world. Ahitaha Jagata, they, they do things that they should not do to other people and to environment and things around us. Next PowerPoint. They have unsatiable desire, namam ashritya dushpuram. So they are propelled by unsatiated desire, more, me. Dambh, man, mada, anvita. So now we see this again. So they are filled with dambh and man and mada. They are filled with moh. They are caught by moh. They are caught by asat. They are ashuchi vrata. They don't purify their speech, thought, and mind. Next PowerPoint. Chintam aparimeyam. So now you can see this. They have endless chinta, worries. So look around. And if you see you have endless worries, that is Asuri Sampat. Kam upabhoga parama. The only thing in the world is entertainment, enjoyment, pleasure. Asha pasha sataiha baddha. They are tied with endless hopes. They keep moving from one thing to another. Kam krodh parayana. They are filled with kam and krodh. Ihante kam bhogartham. They desire passionately the material pleasures. Anyayena artha sanchayan. So, this you can look around all over in the world. The economy crashed in 2008 because anyayena artha sanchayan. They collect wealth by unfair means. Next PowerPoint. I achieved this today. Idam adya maya labdham. Idam api me bhavishyati. Tomorrow I will get this. Hata shatru, I fixed him. I used to hear this a lot when I worked as a manager in the airlines. I fixed him. I'll fix him. Ishwara I'm controller of this department, of this company. I'm in control. I'm in power. Ishwar bhav, Ishwara Bhogi I'm the one who enjoys. Siddho I have achieved this. Balavan I have the energy. I have the Shakti. I have the power. Sukhi I'm happy. And so these thoughts characterize Asuri Bhav. Next PowerPoint. I have wealth. Adhya Asmi. I am from a good family. Avijanava Asmi. Who is there like me? Ko anya asti maya sadrisha. I can do yajya. I can give dan. I can enjoy things. Modishya. And the person is confused. Jnana vimohita. The person is confused by all kinds of thoughts. Next PowerPoint. Anek chitta vibhranta. The chitta of this person is running in all kinds of direction. Moh jala samavrita. They are trapped in the net of moha. Kam bhogeshu prashakta. They are attracted deeply to pleasure and desire. Atma sambhavita. They are confused. Stabdha. They are stunned. Dhanman mad anvita. They are attracted to dhani, wealth, man, praise, and mad, pride. Avidhi purvak yajya. They do yajna following their own whims. They don't follow what is considered proper. They just do, I do it like this. So if you say this, I don't care, I do it like this, probably that is a reflection of Asuri Sampada. Next PowerPoint, please. And then in summary, Asuri Sampada captures Ahankar, Bala, Darpa, Kama, Krodha, all these samsrita. They are the foundation of the person. Ishwaram, Atma Para Deheshu Pradushvanta. So Sri Krishna says, Mama Atma Para Deheshu. So this person, a person with Asuri Bhav, has dvesh, has anger, has droh towards self, himself, other people, and even God, or God which is in everybody. The person has dvesh even for that. And finally, abhya suyaka. So this is apaishun. the negative of that. They are constantly criticizing other people. So basically, what we see is that Asuri Sampada is reflected in our daily behavior. And these examples help us catch ourselves if we have Asuri Sampada, and then we can learn to rationalize it, think through it, reflect on it, and then cultivate it out. Next PowerPoint, please. So an integrated theoretical framework would basically be something like this. Next PowerPoint, please. So what we see here is that if you look at outside, the outer circle is the Jagat, the universe, Prakriti, and we are the Jiva with all our, Sharir, Antakarana, Buddhi, and Atman. So the Jiva and Jagat interacts, and when we interact, then we have a choice. We could either cultivate Daivik Sampada in our behaviors and thoughts and speech, or we could cultivate Asuri Sampada. And those are guided by the three gunas. So Sattva Guna gives us Daivik Sampada, Rajas gives us some of the Asuri Sampada, and Tamas gives some of the other Asuri Sampada. So the three gunas give us the Daivik and Asuri Sampada, and beyond the gunas is Brahma. So by following the Daivik Sampada, we progress towards moksha, and by following the Asuri Sampada, we progress towards Nibandhya, or we get tied in the world. So that is the framework that the Bhagavad Gita provides us about positive psychology and virtues. Next PowerPoint, please. So as I had said, I'm not going to dwell a lot on implications for global psychology, but I'm quickly going to mention a few theories that could be better informed if we brought Indian psychological constructs to enrich them. Next slide, please. So when we talk about virtues, Plato in his Republic talks about the four cardinal virtues: wisdom, justice, fortitude, and temperance. Aristotle talks about phronesis and eudaimonia, which means happiness. And phronesis means prudence, practical virtue, practical wisdom. So, living in the world. Next PowerPoint, please. Aristotle talks about Nicomachean ethics, where he gives 9 virtues. Generosity. So the bounds of that would be not being wasteful and not being stingy. Magnificence, not being vulgar, not being paltry. Magnanimity, not being having vanity, not being smallness. Ambition, not too much, not too little. Gentleness, not being irascible, not being spiritless. Friendship, not being obsequious or doing flattery, and not being quarrelsome. Honesty, too much honesty may be boasting, too little may be self-deprecating. Charming or tactful, too much may be buffoonery and too little may be boorishness. Sense of shame is the only negative one. And here you can see, and I've written a few papers on how lajja is not shame, but the reason Aristotle probably talked about sense of shame is because it helps you shape your behavior. Next PowerPoint. When we talk about values, then as psychologists, we are aware of Rokiche's terminal and instrumental values. And I've just highlighted the, in boldface, happiness, wisdom, peace. These are terminal values that we have studied in positive psychology. And in instrumental values, love, courage, honesty, and forgiveness. These are some that we have studied in positive psychology. But you can see that a lot of the positive constructs that we have in these values. Next PowerPoint. If you are aware of cross-cultural research, then Salom Schwartz has provided us a universal framework. And if you look in his work, he talks about values as power, achievement, hedonism, stimulation, self-direction. Next PowerPoint. Universalism, benevolence, tradition, conformity, and security. And then these 10 clusters give 56 other values. What is interesting is Schwartz accepts that spirituality or finding meaning in life was not found in all cultures. And when you think about it, Adhyatma is a fundamental virtue or value in India. So you can see there is much for us to contribute to global psychology. Next PowerPoint, please. Let me just tease you by saying this, that if you look at the Handbook of Positive Psychology, 3 editions, ahimsa is missing. When the whole world knows about Gandhiji, when the Gandhi film, Attenborough's Gandhi in 82, won 11 Oscars. So the world knows about Gandhiji. The world knows about Gandhiji, ahimsa, because Nelson Mandela practiced it and brought apartheid down in South Africa. Ahimsa is known in America because Martin Luther King Jr. practiced it and was able to launch civil rights movement. But it's still missing in Western psychological literature in positive psychology. I just let you wonder why. Next PowerPoint. I would just leave this question with you. Why are Indian constructs missing in the Western literature? And why are Indian constructs missing in NPPA? So I'll let you reflect on that for yourself. When we have such a rich heritage of positive psychological constructs and theories and models. I just finished writing a paper on theory of akrodha, or theory of krodha and practice of akrodha. So akrodha is a daivik sampada, and there's a theory of krodha in the Bhagavad Gita in Canto 2. And it's a full swing model that gives antecedents and consequences. Why aren't we paying attention to it? Finally, the last PowerPoint next, please. So I hope I have delivered on the 3 promises. All is well. How to live or act, cultivating the 26 virtues and the 26, uprooting the 26 Asuri Sampada. And I shared with you the practice of Kshama in the beginning. We discussed Abhay, we discussed Ahimsa. I shared with you a story. I hope that will stay with you and help you guide, cultivate Ahimsa. I think I have taken the full 2 hours less the 5 minutes that went in introduction. We are at the end of the time. If there is time for people, I will be around, so I'll be happy to answer questions.
Sure. So
thank you very much.
thank you, Professor Bhawuk, for that very insightful session. It was wonderful to learn about all the concepts that you shared around the Ahimsa prayer, the wisdom of saints, the paths for leading a harmonious life, some of the indigenous positive constructs you discussed, the concept of Atman and the Indian concept of self, of course, the Devik and the Asuri Sampadas that you spoke about, and the implications of positive psychology and some of the very, thought-provoking questions you left us with. Now, I'd like to invite questions from the audience. So you could raise your hand to ask a question and we will unmute you so that you can ask your question yourself. Or if you feel comfortable writing down your question, then you can write it down in the chat window and we can read it and answer it.
No questions. Good. Let's go home.
So we have one question, I think, from Kriti. Yeah. And we have a couple of questions actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Uh, Thank you, sir, for a really wonderful talk on Bhagavad Gita and positive psychology. So, I really don't have a question, but I really want to understand your take on why ahimsa, like a very important construct that Gandhiji also talks about, and it is a base of our Vedic culture, is not being included in Western literature and not much even highlighted. So I really want to understand why is that, because it actually contributes a lot. So I would like to hear your views on that.
Um, a simple and direct answer is that we all value what is valued in our culture.
Hmm.
And so we are all ethnocentric. If we start from that understanding, then we can have intercultural dialogue. If we start from that position, then we can explore the world for other pieces of wisdom and knowledge. The West has become narrow minded because of its affluence and success, and has lost historical insight that up to 1760, India and China were the first world economically. It was colonization that destroyed their economy. India and China produced three-fourths of world GDP up to 1760. And by 1950 or 1947, when the British left, India was producing 4% of GDP and China was producing 6% of world GDP. So they had gone down from three-fourths to 10%. But both these countries are now rising also economically. So sometimes we think that the Indian wisdom is that of, recluse culture, is that of people who did not value material, knowledge and material things. And that's a misconception. We were economically advanced because of our own skills. And the West has done well also. But right now, people, for last 50 years or post World War II, people have been, focused on USA and Europe and building Europe. And so all the knowledge in social science, in psychology has come from the West. And only now for the last, 10, 15, 20 years, we have been making raising voice or asking questions and saying that, but wait a minute, we know this and this is how this works. So I think we all, you and I also need to be aware that we value what is valued in our culture. We know what is our culture. We have learned culturally, and we should not be limited to that box. But right now, because of colonization, history of colonization and affluence in the West, people are basically focusing on uh, their own cultural knowledge as the ultimate knowledge. If you look at the history of liberalism, and Sir Bhikhu Parik has done a wonderful job reviewing the literature and reminding us that even people like Locke and John Stuart Mill, who were champions of liberalism, which the Indian intelligentsia values tremendously today, they were hated by other British, the mainstream British people, because they believed every individual anywhere in the world could achieve the same objective. And the British did not like it. They thought they were superior. But even Locke, John Locke and John Stuart Mill thought that culturally the British were superior to other cultures. So even in the most liberal of liberals in the British, there was cultural superiority. And I would say, as a cultural researcher, that probably that is true for all cultures. We also have cultural superiority. Chinese have cultural superiority. Egyptian have cultural superiority. So maybe we are all flawed. But then don't brag about liberalism as the ultimate goal, and that we are liberal and you people are valuing your culture, because even in your culture you value your own culture, and that is the questions we ask is shaped by culture. There's a paper in 1971 that talks about. So why are they not paying attention to ahimsa? Because it's not part of their culture, it's not coming from their culture. If they paid attention to Jesus, they would see that it is part of their culture, but they don't pay attention to Jesus that much. They don't pay attention to what he said in Sermon on the Mount. If you come to the altar and if you have not made peace with your brother, go make peace with your brother, then come to the altar. And if you practice that, then you would practice ahimsa, because you would not even be angry with anybody. So again, like I said, simple answer: history of colonialism, valuing our own culture. So then it becomes our duty to, as a global citizen, to bring our cultural ideas that make sense to us, and not as, this is it, but as, hey, how about an alternative? Would you consider this as an alternative? And especially something like ahimsa that has worked in Africa, that has worked in America, and has worked in India, and worked in South Asia, and in many other countries. I think we should pay attention to it. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Professor Bhawuk, for your answer. We have another question from Miss Nirmala. So, if she can please ask her question now. So I'll request the organizers to please unmute her so that she can ask her question.
We have unmuted her.
Good evening. Good evening, sir. Thank you so much for the inspiring talk. I'm not a full-fledged psychology student, but I have done some certificate courses, and my interest in the field actually has made me join this association. Sir, I have listened to your talk, and of course, we know something about performing our tasks in the mode of a karma yogi in the Indian context. And we hear about doing things, being in a state of flow. How are they different from each other, sir? I'd be very happy.
Okay, so the question is Nishkam, is Karma Yoga similar to what Csikszentmihalyi talks about as
Yes.
flow?
Yeah.
Or being in flow
Yes.
state. Okay.
Yes.
So if you think about all the great artists and musicians, with all their personal problems, then we would see that they create in a moment of flow or moments of flow, but they are not practicing Nishkam Karma. Because otherwise, why would they be depressed? And I'm not putting down depression, I'm not trying to simplify depression, but why would you have problems in life if you follow Karma Yoga, if you follow Nishkam Karma? So basically what it would mean is all great art and thoughts are created when the person has done enough sadhana and has mastered the tools of the trade, so that he or she effortlessly creates the piece, the product. That is flow. All dance performers, even children performers, once they have mastered one little bit of performance, they get in flow. They know I did well because they don't remember what they did, but they were very happy doing it. So flow is mastery of skills, becoming one with the skill. And in that moment, if you visualize a Sufi dance, then yes, the person has become Sufi for that moment. In that flow, the person has become a Sufi because the person did not remember anything but what the person was doing. But after that moment is over, how do you deal with it? That is where Nishkam Karm comes. So in a way, Nishkam Karm would be before the flow movement and after the flow movement. In the flow movement, you have become a Sufi. But what do you do before the flow movement? So think about the Sufi dance. What do? They start whirling, but they know they are whirling for what purpose? To be one with Allah, to be one with the Creator. And after they have become one with the Creator and they come back to the material senses, and now they are with the people around and they are hungry and they want to eat, how do they act? They carry that movement that they were in, the oneness with the universe. And I think the creative people and the flow literature misses this beginning and end part and simply focuses on the creative product and the flow, which is the mastery of the skills. So I hope that helps you understand the difference
Yes, sir.
between
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Karma Yoga and Nishkam Karma and what is flow. And by the way, thank you very much for asking the question, because that is your gift to me. I've
Oh,
always, I know flow, I know Nishkam Karma Yoga, but this is not how I have ever explained this. So I'm grateful to you.
thank you, sir. I feel blessed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Bhawuk. Any more questions? Anyone else would like to ask?
Was there anything in the chat box?
So no questions in the chat box. I think we had a comment from Miss Madhulika Bajpai, who said this is so nice.
Okay.
So if there are no further, okay, so Pulkit Khanna is asking a question, so we'll just wait for a second.
Actually, no, I just wanted to take a moment to thank Professor Bhavuk for, so patiently taking the time out to explain everything, because we appreciate you're in a different time zone and it must be really early in the morning for you. And it's extremely admirable to see your passion for the subject. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So yes, a lot of appreciatory comments coming in the chat box. A lot of people thanking you and appreciating the session. So thank you, Professor Bhawuk, for taking out the time for this session and sharing your insights with us. It was indeed wonderful and very enlightening to hear your thoughts on this subject. Now, so any more questions? Aarti, would you like to ask a question?
We may post the PowerPoint, so if people have question, and I don't think I put my email address there, so if you can add bhavuk@hawaii.edu in the first PowerPoint, and maybe add a note that you can ask questions or send me an email.
Yeah. Yes, sir. I am Professor Aarti Bakshi from Jammu University.
जी, नमस्ते.
और नमस्ते सर. बहुत अच्छी प्रेजेंटेशन थी और इतना आपने इस टॉपिक में बांध के रखा जो हिलने का दिल नहीं किया जरा भी, बिकॉज यू आर सो मच कनेक्टेड विद दैट ना, कि हर चीज जो थोड़ा सा डिस्टर्बिंग होती है, नहीं समझ में आती है, but it was so clear and so nicely you have put up these models and those who want to work in this, because we have also started with this paper, positive psychology. But I know that the teacher cannot teach in the way it has to be. It will take time in understanding them also, ki what actually it is, how they have to project the things. So it is such a nice way you have given it, and definitely I will like to see your papers also, your work which you have done, so that things will be more clear to us, and we can be in touch also
So please send
through
me an
your
email and I'll.
emails. Through your emails.
Yeah, so please send me an email and I'll send you the papers.
Yes, sir.
Sure. So thank you, Professor Aarti Bakshi.
Hold on,
Thank you
hold
for
on.
asking the question.
Let me write my email in the chat box. Okay, I did. So I put my email in the chat box, bhawuk@hawaii.edu. Okay, so people can access that. But Shilpa ji can post it on the NPPA website. And then
Yeah, I
you can
think that
send me.
that will be good if you post it there, na, so that we can see.
Sure. So thank you for your
Thank you.
question.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. All of you. Thank you, please.
Okay, so thank you all for joining the webinar today. And thank you, Professor Bhawuk, once again for sharing your thoughts. You can all please share your feedback. There's a feedback link that will be posted in the chat box. So please do share your feedback on the session today. Please also go through the NPPA website. We will be sharing the link to the website one more time. It's already there in the chat section if you just scroll through. But I think we can share that one more time. And thank you once again for all of you for joining. And have a very pleasant evening ahead.
Sure. Have a wonderful evening.
Yeah. Have a wonderful day, Professor Bhawuk. Thank you.
Can you send the feedback form in the mail also?
Sure. So